I'm Valeria, 32 years old. Once I was a nurse who loved my life, and my husband Andrew. We had the perfect marriage, or so I thought. My sister Sophia always seemed to want what I had, but I never imagined she'd take it all. When I discovered their betrayal, my world shattered completely. The same day divorce papers arrived, I found out I was pregnant. 4 years later, in a small coffee shop, Andrew saw me again, and the little boy behind me who looked just like him. If you're watching this, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like and subscribe button before we dive into how my perfect life fell apart and the moment my ex-husband realized what he'd truly lost. I grew up in a peaceful suburban neighborhood in Pennsylvania with loving parents who always taught us the value of responsibility and family. My sister Sophia was 3 years younger, and from early on there seemed to be a competitive streak in her that I never quite understood. While I focused on studying and building a stable future, Sophia chased popularity and attention. I met Andrew during my sophomore year of college. I was pursuing nursing while he was in the architecture program. We first crossed paths in the campus library, where I found him struggling with a research paper for his elective course on medical facility design. I offered to help, and what started as a study session turned into 4 hours of conversation. "You explained healthcare logistics better than my professor," he told me that night, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled. For the next 2 years, we remained friends. I dated other people, and so did he, but we always seemed to gravitate back to each other for coffee or study sessions. It wasn't until senior year during a campus festival that everything changed. Andrew took my hand as we walked between booths, and when I looked at him questioningly, he simply said, "I think I've been waiting for you my whole life." Our courtship was a whirlwind after that. What had built slowly over years as friendship ignited into something passionate and certain. We graduated, started our careers, and got engaged within 18 months. On our wedding day, Sophia served as my maid of honor despite my hesitations. There had been incidents, my missing jewelry found in her purse, a boyfriend of mine she'd tried to kiss years earlier, but my parents insisted that sisters needed to support each other. Looking back at our wedding photos now, I can see what I missed then, the way Sophia's eyes followed Andrew, the tight grip she kept on his arm during photos. "You've always had everything handed to you," she whispered when we hugged at the reception. I pulled back confused, but she was already smiling for the next guest. After the wedding, Andrew and I settled into our careers. I worked at Mercy General Hospital, while Andrew joined Davidson and Partners, a prestigious architecture firm specializing in commercial developments. We lived in a small apartment, saving diligently for our dream home. Andrew would spread blueprints across our dining table each night, sketching ideas for the house he wanted to build us someday. 3 years into our marriage, we purchased a beautiful colonial-style home with a wraparound porch and backyard perfect for the children we planned to have. I remember the day we got the keys, how Andrew carried me across the threshold, just like he had on our wedding night. "Our forever home," he called it, spinning me around in the empty living room. As we settled into home ownership, small tensions began to surface about starting a family. I was ready to become a mother, feeling that biological clock ticking as I approached 30. Andrew wanted to wait until he made partner at his firm. Just 2 more years, he would promise, kissing my forehead. "I want to give our children everything." Despite this one point of contention, our life seemed perfect. We hosted dinner parties where Andrew charmed our friends with his wit, while I prepared elaborate meals. Weekends were spent hiking local trails or visiting nearby cities, always planning, always dreaming about our future together. My relationship with my parents remained strong. They visited often, bringing homemade desserts and asking about our lives with genuine interest. Sophia, meanwhile, drifted between jobs and relationships, never seeming to find stability. She would disappear for months, then resurface with stories of opportunities that had fallen through, or boyfriends who had wronged her. Every time Sophia faced a crisis, I was there to help. I lent her money for rent, drove her to job interviews, and offered a sympathetic ear when relationships ended. Andrew always supported my desire to help my sister, though in hindsight his interest in her welfare went beyond brotherly concern. Our marriage had rituals that I treasured: coffee together every morning before work, Sunday brunches on our porch, surprise lunch visits to each other's workplaces, and elaborate anniversary celebrations. For our 5th anniversary, Andrew commissioned a painting of the spot where we first said, "I love you." I remember tracing the brushstrokes with my finger, marvelling at his thoughtfulness. Then came the day Sophia called sobbing about being evicted from her apartment. Without consulting me, Andrew offered our guest room. "It's just temporary," he assured me as I expressed concerns. "She's family Val, we can't let her live on the street." I had no idea this decision would be the beginning of the end of everything I loved. The day Sophia moved in, Andrew took the entire day off work to help her. I found this strange since he rarely took time off, even when I had been sick with the flu the previous winter. When I arrived home after my shift, I found them laughing in the kitchen, takeout containers spread across the counter. "We were just catching up," Andrew explained, sliding an arm around my waist. "Your sister has some pretty wild stories about her travels." Sophia smiled at me, but something in her expression made me uneasy. "Andrew has been so helpful," she said. "You're lucky to have such a caring husband." The first few weeks seemed normal enough, though I noticed Andrew suddenly taking an interest in activities he had previously avoided. When Sophia mentioned wanting to try a new fusion restaurant downtown, Andrew immediately suggested we all go, despite having refused my invitations to the same place months earlier. As a nurse, my schedule was demanding and unpredictable. The hospital was chronically understaffed, forcing me to work extra shifts and overnights. I would return home exhausted to find Andrew and Sophia watching movies, making dinner together, or huddled over her laptop, working on job applications. "You should join us," Andrew would say, but his invitation always felt hollow, especially when he knew I needed sleep before my next shift. The dynamics in my own home began to shift in subtle ways. Andrew started coming to bed later, claiming he was helping Sophia with her resume or listening to her problems. Our date nights were increasingly cancelled due to his work emergencies or his sudden exhaustion. One evening, I walked into the kitchen to find them standing unusually close. Andrew had his hand on Sophia's shoulder, and they jumped apart when I entered. Something about their guilty expressions sent a chill through me. "Am I interrupting?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Just showing Sophia some apartment listings," Andrew replied, turning the laptop screen toward me a bit too eagerly. Later that week, I overheard them laughing about inside jokes I wasn't part of. When I entered the room, their conversation immediately shifted to something mundane. I tried to dismiss my growing suspicions, blaming my paranoia on exhaustion and stress from work. Jamie, my best friend since high school, was the first to voice concerns. During our monthly lunch, she asked bluntly, "Don't you think it's strange how much time Andrew spends with Sophia? She's going through a rough patch." I defended, though doubt had already taken root in my mind. "Just be careful," Jamie warned. "I've seen how she looks at him." When I tried to discuss Sophia's extended stay with Andrew, our conversation quickly escalated into our first major fight in years. 3 months wasn't the plan," I said. "She's not even seriously looking for a job." Andrew's response caught me off guard. "Why are you so jealous of your own sister? She has nothing while you have everything. Can't you just be generous for once?" His words stung like a slap. This wasn't the Andrew I knew, the man who valued honesty and directness. He was twisting my reasonable concerns into character flaws. "This isn't about generosity," I countered. "Something feels off." "You're being paranoid," he snapped. "Sophia was right about you always needing to be the center of attention." That stopped me cold. "You two have been talking about me," Andrew backpedaled, claiming I was misinterpreting everything. The argument ended unresolved, with Andrew sleeping in the guest room, supposedly to give me space. A week later, I found a text message on Andrew's phone when he was in the shower. It was from Sophia. "Last night was amazing. I can't wait until we can stop sneaking around." When confronted, Andrew had an explanation ready. They had been planning a surprise anniversary party for me, and Sophia had been helping him contact my old friends from nursing school. He showed me emails to back up his story, and I felt foolish for doubting him. To save my marriage, I planned a special evening, our favourite meal, candles, the works. 2 hours after he was supposed to be home, Andrew texted that he had to work late on a major project. From the kitchen window, I could see Sophia wasn't home either. That night, as I sat alone at a table set for 2, I finally acknowledged the truth. I had been avoiding something was very wrong in my marriage, and my sister was at the centre of it. Our 7th wedding anniversary fell on a Tuesday. I had been scheduled for a night shift, but swapped with a colleague to surprise Andrew. We hadn't been connecting for months, and I was determined to save our marriage. I stopped by a bakery for his favourite chocolate torte and picked up a bottle of the champagne from our wedding. As I pulled into our driveway at 7 p.m, I noticed Sophia's car parked on the street. Perfect, I thought. I can include her in the celebration and maybe rebuild our sisterly bond as well. The house was unusually quiet when I entered. No TV noise, no conversation from the kitchen. I called out, but no one answered. Setting the cake and champagne on the counter, I headed upstairs to change before finding Andrew. I heard it before I reached our bedroom, a sound so distinctive that my stomach instantly knotted. Heavy breathing, a moan that wasn't mine but was intimately familiar from childhood shared rooms. My sister's voice. Standing outside my own bedroom door, I felt as though I was watching myself from a distance, my hand moving toward the doorknob as if in slow motion. I should have walked away. I should have spared myself the visual confirmation of what I already knew in my heart. But I needed the truth. The door wasn't even fully closed. One push, and I saw them, Andrew and Sophia, in our marital bed. The bed where we had planned our future, discussed baby names, comforted each other after bad days. They didn't notice me immediately. It was the sound of my wedding photo falling from my hands and shattering on the hardwood floor that made them turn. Valeria. Sophia scrambled to cover herself, but Andrew just stared at me, no surprise or shame in his expression. That's what broke me more than anything. He wasn't even startled by my presence. How long? My voice sounded strange, detached. Andrew sat up slowly, making no move to dress. Does it matter? 5 months. Sophia interjected, a strange pride in her voice. Since about a week after I moved in. 5 months. Nearly half a year of lies, gaslighting, and betrayal under my own roof, while I worked extra shifts to support us all. I've been unhappy for months, Valeria, Andrew said, as if this justified everything. You're always working, always tired. We barely connect anymore. So instead of talking to me, you sleep with my sister? The calm in my voice surprised even me. It just happened, Sophia said, though her hand possessively touching Andrew's shoulder told a different story. Get out, I said quietly. Both of you, now. Andrew had the audacity to look offended. This is my house too. I'm not going anywhere. Then I will. I turned to leave, but Andrew caught my arm. Don't be dramatic. We can discuss this like adults. I pulled away from him. There's nothing to discuss. My husband and sister betrayed me in the most intimate way possible. What exactly should we discuss about that? That night, I stayed with Jamie, sobbing until I had no tears left. The next morning, I called my parents, expecting their support and outrage on my behalf. Initially, they were shocked and angry with both Andrew and Sophia, but when I called again 3 days later, their tone had changed. Relationships are complicated, sweetheart, my mother said carefully. Andrew says you've been distant for years. And Sophia seems really in love, my father added. Maybe in time you can all heal and be a family again. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A family? They destroyed our family. People make mistakes, my mother countered. Holding grudges only hurts you in the end. Andrew moved out that night to think things through, taking only a suitcase of clothes. 1 week later, divorce papers arrived at Jamie's apartment, where I was still staying. He wanted the house, claiming his income had paid the majority of the mortgage. His lawyer suggested I be reasonable to avoid a lengthy court battle. The betrayal manifested physically. Insomnia kept me awake until dawn. Then exhaustion would crash over me during work hours. I couldn't eat without feeling nauseated. My hands shook when I tried to perform simple nursing tasks. I lost 12 pounds in 2 weeks, my scrubs hanging loose around my waist. The day after receiving the divorce papers, I was overcome with dizziness during my shift. A colleague insisted on running some tests. "Congratulations," Dr. Patel said gently, looking at my chart. "You're about 6 weeks pregnant." The timing meant the baby was conceived during a rare, intimate night before I discovered the affair. A night when Andrew had returned from a business trip, unusually affectionate and attentive. For a brief, shining moment, I considered that this news might change everything. Then I saw the announcement in our local paper's online edition. Andrew Thompson and Sophia Reeves announced their engagement with a wedding planned in just 3 months. The decision formed in my mind with crystal clarity. Andrew would never know about this child. He had made his choice, abandoning our marriage without a second thought. I would not use a baby to force him back or complicate the already painful situation. 2 weeks later, my parents hosted a family dinner and invited both Sophia and me. "We're trying to keep the peace," my father explained on the phone. "Family should stick together through difficult times." I arrived to find Sophia wearing my grandmother's pearls, a gift my mother had apparently passed to her. Andrew sat beside her, his hand on her knee, in a gesture so familiar it made me physically ill. I excused myself and vomited in the bathroom while my mother asked through the door if I was still having trouble adjusting. As I left that night, my decision solidified. I could not heal while maintaining connections to people who saw my pain as an inconvenience to their happiness. The next day, I submitted my resignation at the hospital, applied for nursing positions across the country, and told only Jamie about my pregnancy and plans. Seattle offered distance opportunity and the chance to become someone new, a mother who was defined by her strength rather than her betrayal. My first month in Seattle was spent in a modest 1-bedroom apartment, fighting morning sickness while submitting job applications to every hospital in the area. Each interview required careful planning, loose blouses to hide my growing bump, strategic scheduling around bouts of nausea. At 14 weeks pregnant, I secured a position in the pediatric unit at Seattle Children's Hospital. "Your experience with emergency pediatric care is impressive," the nursing director said during my interview. If she noticed my pregnancy, she made no mention of it. "When can you start?" Moving to a new city while pregnant and alone taught me a resilience I didn't know I possessed. I assembled baby furniture by myself, navigated new medical providers, and learned the bus routes to and from the hospital for when I could no longer drive comfortably. Every step was both terrifying and empowering. The apartment next to mine belonged to Elaine, a retired teacher in her 70s, who noticed my pregnancy almost immediately. She knocked on my door one evening with a homemade lasagna. "I raised 4 children on my own," she said, placing the dish on my counter without waiting for an invitation inside. "You look like you could use a good meal and maybe some company." Elaine became my unexpected support system. She accompanied me to prenatal appointments when Jamie couldn't fly out from Pennsylvania, helped me prepare the nursery, and shared wisdom from her own experiences as a single mother. "The father?" she asked once as we folded tiny onesies. "Not in the picture," I replied, the phrase I'd practiced for inevitable questions. Elaine nodded, asking nothing more. "Then this little one has us." The 20-week ultrasound revealed that I was having a boy. As the technician pointed out tiny fingers and toes on the monitor, emotion overwhelmed me, and this child was real, growing inside me, depending entirely on my strength. I had never felt more connected to another human being. "Would you like to know the gender?" the technician asked. When she said, "It's a boy," I pressed my hand against the screen, tears streaming down my face. "Hello, Lucas." I whispered the name coming to me instantly. Lucas had been my grandfather's name, a man known for his integrity and kindness. Preparing the nursery gave me a sense of purpose and joy. I painted the walls a soft blue with white clouds, assembled the crib with Elaine's help, and arranged stuffed animals Jamie had sent from home. Each completed task was a step toward our future, a future I was building alone, but with growing confidence. When my water broke 3 weeks early, Elaine drove me to the hospital while Jamie boarded an emergency flight from Pennsylvania. The delivery was complicated, 26 hours of labor ending in an emergency C-section when Lucas's heart rate dropped dangerously low. "Someone should call your family," a well-meaning nurse suggested as they prepped me for surgery. "They're on their way," I lied, thinking of Jamie somewhere over the Midwest and Elaine in the waiting room. These were my family now, people who chose to stand by me. The first time I held Lucas, I understood what unconditional love truly meant. He had a full head of dark hair and his father's distinctive cleft chin, a detail that simultaneously broke my heart and strengthened my resolve. Jamie arrived hours after the birth, exhausted but beaming as she took photos of her godson. "He looks just like—" she started, then caught herself. "I know," I said quietly. "He does." The first months of motherhood tested every limit I had. Balancing night feedings with my return to work after 8 weeks of leave required a carefully orchestrated schedule. Elaine offered to watch Lucas during my day shifts, refusing payment beyond occasional groceries. "I missed having little ones around," she insisted. "You're doing me a favor." When Lucas was 6 months old, I joined a single parents support group at the community center. There I met other mothers and fathers navigating the complex waters of raising children alone. We exchanged childcare tips, vented about sleepless nights, and celebrated each other's small victories. By Lucas's first birthday, we had settled into a rhythm. My position at the hospital had become permanent with better benefits and more regular hours. Lucas was walking, babbling constant streams of almost words, and developing a personality that was curious and determined. I documented every milestone, creating a private digital album that only Jamie had access to. As Lucas grew from baby to toddler, his resemblance to Andrew became more pronounced. Sometimes I would catch a glimpse of him from a certain angle and feel a painful jolt of recognition. But Lucas was his own person too. He had my laugh, my love of music, and a gentleness with other children that was all his own. By his 3rd birthday, Lucas was a chatterbox, asking endless questions about the world. "Why is the sky blue? Mummy, how do birds know where to fly? Can we get a puppy tomorrow?" His curiosity was matched only by his energy, running rather than walking, climbing anything taller than himself, making friends with every child at the playground. The question I dreaded finally came when he was almost 4. "Do I have a daddy?" he asked one night as I tucked him into bed. I had prepared for this, researching age-appropriate responses with his developmental stage in mind. "Yes," I told him honestly. "Everyone has a father. Yours lives far away. Why doesn't he visit like Emma's daddy?" "Some daddies can't be with their children," I explained, keeping my voice steady. "But you have me and Elaine and Aunt Jamie who loves you very much." He seemed satisfied with this answer, at least temporarily. I knew there would be more questions as he grew older, but for now, we were enough for each other. What I didn't know then was that our carefully constructed life was about to collide with the past I had left behind. After 4 years in Seattle, our Saturday morning routine was well established. Lucas and I would visit Maplewood Coffee Shop, where he would get a hot chocolate with extra whipped cream while I ordered my latte. We would share a blueberry muffin at our favourite corner table, then walk to the nearby park if weather permitted. This particular Saturday in May was unseasonably warm. Lucas wore his favourite dinosaur t-shirt, bouncing with excitement as we entered the coffee shop. "Can I order by myself today, Mummy?" he asked, his small hand in mine. "Of course, buddy," I smiled, lifting him so he could see over the counter. While Lucas carefully enunciated his order to the barista, I scanned the crowded shop for an available table. That's when I saw him, Andrew, sitting alone by the window, staring intently at his laptop. My heart stopped, then raced painfully. 4 years had added subtle lines around his eyes, but otherwise he looked exactly as I remembered. I quickly turned away, praying he hadn't noticed me. Lucas finished his order, beaming with pride, as the barista handed him a loyalty card with a new stamp. "We did it, Mummy," he exclaimed as I set him down. "Mary said I did a perfect job." "You sure did, sweetheart." I tried to keep my voice calm while maneuvering us to a table as far from Andrew as possible. We had just settled in when Lucas announced he needed the bathroom. I hesitated, knowing the restrooms were visible from where Andrew sat. "Let's go together," I suggested, but Lucas shook his head firmly. "I'm a big boy now. I can go by myself. You wait for our drinks." Before I could object, he was already marching toward the restrooms, passing directly in Andrew's line of sight. I held my breath, watching Andrew's head lift from his laptop screen, his gaze following the small boy with idle curiosity. When Lucas emerged from the bathroom, he ran back to our table, calling out, "Mummy, they have soap that smells like lemons." His voice carried across the busy coffee shop. I saw the exact moment Andrew's eyes snapped from Lucas to me. The recognition, the shock, the rapid calculations happening behind his eyes as he took in Lucas's features. A miniature version of himself. Lucas climbed onto his chair, oblivious to the man now standing and walking toward our table. I wanted to run to grab Lucas and disappear, but my legs wouldn't move. "Valeria." Andrew's voice hadn't changed. "I thought you moved back to Pennsylvania." I forced myself to look up at him. "Hello, Andrew." His eyes were fixed on Lucas, who was happily arranging sugar packets into patterns. Is he my son?" I said firmly. "Lucas." Lucas looked up at the mention of his name, studying Andrew with innocent curiosity. "Who are you?" he asked bluntly, in that way only children can. Andrew's face paled as he took in Lucas's features, the cleft chin, the shape of his eyes, the cowlick in his dark hair. "He looks exactly like my childhood photos," he said quietly, more to himself than to me. "What can I help you with, Andrew?" I kept my voice steady, professional, as if speaking to a stranger. He pulled out a chair without asking and sat down. "When were you going to tell me I had a son?" Lucas looked between us, confusion clouding his face. "Mummy, Lucas, can you count how many dinosaurs are on your placemat?" I asked, buying time. When he was absorbed in the task, I turned back to Andrew. "This isn't the place for this conversation." 4 years, Valeria." Anger edged into his voice. 4 years of my son's life. Gone. You made your choice when you served me divorce papers without a single conversation, I replied, keeping my voice low. You chose my sister over your marriage. I chose to protect my child from people who could hurt him so carelessly. Andrew ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache despite everything. Sophia left me 6 months ago. For her yoga instructor, who apparently comes from family money. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, not feeling sorry at all. "But your marital problems aren't my concern anymore." "My son is my concern," he hissed. "You had no right to keep this from me." Lucas tugged on my sleeve. "Mommy, who is this man? Why is he angry?" Andrew's expression softened as he looked at Lucas. "I'm an old friend of your mum's," he said, extending his hand. "My name is Andrew." Lucas shook his hand solemnly. "I'm Lucas. I'm 4.5. 4.5, Andrew repeated, shooting me an accusatory look. "That's very grown up." I gathered our things, sensing this conversation could only deteriorate further. "We need to go, Lucas. Say goodbye to Mr. Thompson." "But we haven't had our muffin," Lucas protested. "We'll get one to go," I promised, already standing. Andrew stood too, reaching into his wallet and pulling out a business card. "I'm in Seattle for a conference. I'm staying at the Westin downtown room 1412. Call me, we need to talk." He placed the card on the table. I want to be part of his life, Valeria. I have rights. As I led Lucas toward the exit, I heard Andrew call after me. I'll find a lawyer here if I have to. In the car, Lucas peppered me with questions. Who was that man? Why did he make you sad? Is he really your friend? I gripped the steering wheel, trying to formulate answers that wouldn't confuse or frighten him. He's someone I knew a long time ago before we moved to Seattle. Sometimes when grown-ups haven't seen each other for a while, they have complicated feelings. Lucas seemed to accept this explanation, moving on to telling me about a bird he'd spotted near the coffee shop. As he chatted, my mind raced with implications and decisions. I had always known this day might come, but facing it now felt overwhelming. At home, I called Jamie while Lucas watched cartoons in the living room. He found us, I said when she answered. Jamie didn't need clarification. How? Pure coincidence. He's here for a conference and was at our regular coffee shop. My voice broke. Jamie, he's threatening to get a lawyer. He wants to be part of Lucas's life. After abandoning you both, after cheating with your sister, absolutely not. But legally, he is Lucas's father. Sperm donor, Jamie corrected. A father is someone who shows up, who makes sacrifices, who puts his child first. He's done none of that. Because he didn't know, I admitted. The weight of that secret pressed on me anew. Because he was too busy sleeping with your sister to notice his wife was pregnant, Jamie countered. You need to call Patricia. She was referring to the family lawyer I had consulted when first learning of my pregnancy. That evening, after Lucas was asleep, I stared at Andrew's business card. The logo for his architecture firm had changed, but his name was followed by partner. He had achieved the promotion he had been chasing when our marriage fell apart. Against my better judgment, I called the number. I want to meet tomorrow, I said when he answered. Without Lucas. We can talk then. I could hear the relief in his voice. Thank you, Valeria. As I hung up, I wondered if I was making the right decision. Part of me wanted to pack our belongings and disappear again, but Lucas deserved better than a life spent running, and I deserved to face this confrontation with the strength I had built over the past 4 years. The morning after our coffee shop encounter, my hands shook as I dropped Lucas off with Elaine. I hadn't told her the full story yet, just that I needed to meet with someone from my past. Take all the time you need, she said, noting my distress but not prying. Lucas and I are making cookies today. I had arranged to meet Andrew in a public park, neutral ground, where I could leave easily if needed. When I arrived, he was already there, pacing near the central fountain. He wore a suit, despite the casual setting, reminding me that he was in town for business, not for us. Thank you for coming, he said formally, as if we were meeting for a job interview, rather than discussing the child we shared. I sat on a bench, keeping space between us. I'm here to listen to what you have to say, and then I'll explain my position. After that, we can decide if lawyers need to be involved. Andrew nodded, sitting beside me, but maintaining distance. First, I want to know everything about him. When was he born? What was his first word? Is he allergic to anything? Does he play sports? The genuine interest in his voice caught me off guard. I had prepared for anger threats negotiations, not this hunger for information about the son he had just discovered. Lucas Alexander Reeves was born on November 12th, 3 weeks early. His first word was book. He's allergic to strawberries, but not other berries. He loves dinosaurs, building blocks, and pretending to be a doctor. The facts flowed easily, safer territory than the emotions beneath them. Alexander was my father's name, Andrew noted quietly. I know. I wanted him to have something from both sides of his family, even if he didn't know it yet. Andrew was silent for a moment, absorbing this. Why didn't you tell me, Valeria? I understand being angry, feeling betrayed, but this was my child too. I found out I was pregnant the day after receiving divorce papers. The same week your engagement announcement appeared in the paper. I kept my voice even, stating facts rather than accusations. You made it very clear that your future was with Sophia, not with me or any family we might have had. That didn't give you the right to To protect my child from a toxic situation, I interrupted. From a father who abandoned his marriage without a backward glance, from an aunt who betrayed her own sister, from grandparents who chose peacekeeping over supporting their daughter through trauma. The words came faster now, years of unexpressed hurt pushing through. What kind of mother would I have been if I had subjected my baby to that environment? Andrew looked genuinely stunned. I would never have abandoned my child. But you did abandon your wife, Andrew, without a single conversation about what went wrong, without one attempt to fix things. You served me divorce papers and moved on to my sister within days. I shook my head. How could I trust you with something as precious as our son after that? We sat in heavy silence before Andrew spoke again. I made a terrible mistake, Valeria. With Sophia, with everything, I don't even know, lost bored, having some kind of midlife crisis at 34. He ran his hands through his hair. It doesn't excuse anything, but please believe that if I had known about Lucas, things would have been different. Would they? I asked skeptically. You would have stayed in an unhappy marriage for a child. I would have been his father regardless of our marital status. His voice hardened. And now I intend to be. I've already contacted a family attorney here in Seattle. I'm going to file for partial custody. The threat hung between us like a storm cloud. Lucas doesn't know you, Andrew. You can't just walk into his life and expect to take him home every other weekend. He's a person, not property to be divided. Then help me get to know him. Supervised visits at first. I'll move to Seattle if I have to. I studied his face, searching for the man I had once loved enough to marry. There were glimpses, the intensity in his eyes when he cared about something, the determined set of his jaw. But there was also an entitlement that had perhaps always been there, hidden beneath charm and shared goals. I need time to think, I finally said, and to consult my own attorney. Any relationship with Lucas needs to be built on what's best for him, not on legal threats or your feelings of entitlement. As I stood to leave, Andrew caught my wrist gently. He's beautiful, Valeria. He looks so much like my childhood photos. It's uncanny. You've done an amazing job with him that's obvious even from the few minutes I saw you together. His voice softened. I'm not your enemy here. I just want a chance to know my son. I pulled my arm away. I'll call you in a few days, after I've spoken with my lawyer and thought about how to approach this with Lucas. Walking back to my car, I felt the weight of the past 4 years pressing down on me. The carefully constructed life I had built for Lucas and myself now had a crack running through its foundation. The next week was a whirlwind of activity. I consulted with Patricia, who had relocated to Seattle herself 2 years earlier in a stroke of luck. She advised me on father's rights in Washington state versus Pennsylvania, where Lucas was born. He has a strong case for establishing paternity and some form of visitation, she explained, but his abandonment, even if he didn't know about the pregnancy, works in our favor for maintaining primary custody. Sophia called unexpectedly, her number appearing on my phone for the first time in 4 years. Andrew told me about the boy, she said without preamble. I thought you should know he's only pursuing this to hurt me. What are you talking about? I asked, instantly wary. Our divorce was messy. I left him so naturally his ego can't handle it. She paused dramatically. I could testify about his temper, his controlling nature, things that would help you keep full custody. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost laughable. In exchange for what Sophia... Well, I'm having some financial difficulties since the divorce. If you could help out, I'd be very motivated to help you. I ended the call without responding to her offer. Some things never changed. Sophia would always look for ways to benefit from any situation, regardless of who got hurt in the process. Andrew filed for a paternity test the following Monday. The results confirmed what was visibly obvious to anyone who saw them together. Lucas was biologically his son, with legal paternity established. We found ourselves in a family court hearing 3 weeks after our coffee shop encounter. The courtroom was intimidatingly formal. Andrew sat with his attorney occasionally glancing at me across the aisle. I had asked Jamie to fly in for support, and she sat beside me, squeezing my hand periodically. Andrew's lawyer painted me as vindictive, claiming I had deliberately hidden Lucas to punish Andrew for the divorce. My attorney countered with evidence of Andrew's abrupt abandonment of our marriage and his immediate relationship with my sister, arguing that I had made difficult choices to protect my child from a potentially harmful environment. Jamie testified about my emotional state after discovering the affair and receiving divorce papers. She was devastated, Your Honour, physically ill from the betrayal. When she discovered her pregnancy, her primary concern was creating a stable, loving environment for her child, away from the people who had caused such pain. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened carefully to both sides before issuing her ruling. While I understand Ms. Reeves's desire to protect her child, Mr. Thompson has paternal rights that should have been respected. However, Mr. Thompson's behaviour during the dissolution of the marriage indicates a concerning pattern of prioritising his personal desires over family commitments. She ordered supervised visitation for Andrew, gradually increasing in duration as Lucas became comfortable with him. Primary custody remained with me, with the provision that major decisions about Lucas's education, health and welfare would be made jointly once Andrew established a consistent presence in his life. Explaining the situation to Lucas was perhaps the most difficult conversation I'd ever had. We sat in his bedroom, surrounded by his favourite toys for comfort. "Remember the man we met at the coffee shop?" I began gently. Lucas nodded. "The angry man who knew you." "He wasn't really angry, just surprised," I corrected. "His name is Andrew, and he's actually your daddy." Lucas's eyes widened. "My daddy? The one who lives far away?" "Yes, except he doesn't live far away anymore. He wants to get to know you." "Why didn't he want to know me before?" The innocent question pierced my heart. "Sometimes grown-ups make complicated choices," I explained carefully, "but he's very excited to meet you properly now." The first supervised visit took place at a family centre with a social worker present to observe. Lucas was uncharacteristically shy, hiding behind my legs, when Andrew arrived with an enormous stuffed dinosaur. "Hello, Lucas," Andrew said, kneeling to meet him at eye level. "I brought you something. I heard you like dinosaurs." Lucas eyed the gift warily before accepting it. "Thank you." He mumbled, years of my lessons in manners showing through despite his discomfort. The visit was awkward but civil. Andrew tried too hard, asking rapid-fire questions that overwhelmed Lucas. The social worker gently suggested they try an activity instead, and they spent 20 minutes building with blocks, finding a more natural rhythm without forced conversation. As visits continued over the following weeks, Andrew began bringing increasingly extravagant gifts: a child-sized electric car, a tablet loaded with games designer clothes. When I expressed concern about this pattern, he became defensive. "I've missed 4 years of birthdays and Christmases. Let me make up for lost time." "You can't buy his affection, Andrew. He needs consistency and presence, not things." This led to our first major co-parenting argument, with Andrew threatening to seek full custody if I continued to interfere with his relationship with Lucas. "You're under court order to facilitate our relationship," his lawyer reminded me in a stern email. I stood my ground, insisting that material excess wasn't healthy for Lucas's development or for establishing genuine connection. Eventually, Andrew agreed to limit gifts to special occasions, though I suspected this concession was tactical rather than a genuine recognition of my parenting philosophy. As summer stretched into fall, Lucas's initial excitement about his new father began to wane when Andrew missed 2 visits due to work commitments. "Where's Daddy?" Lucas asked the second time, his little face falling when I explained Andrew couldn't make it. He has an important meeting, I repeated Andrew's excuse. He'll see you next week instead. Lucas shrugged with a casualness that broke my heart. It's okay. Can we go to the park with Elaine instead? The ease with which he accepted disappointment suggested he was already learning not to expect too much from his father, a lesson I had hoped he would never have to learn. 6 months after Andrew re-entered our lives, the pattern had become clear. He would be attentive and involved for a few weeks, then work would become unusually demanding, and he would miss visits or cut them short. Each time, Lucas's disappointment lessened his expectations, adjusting downward with each broken promise. During a rare dinner together to discuss Lucas's upcoming 5th birthday, Andrew made an unexpected suggestion. "We should try again, Val," he said, quietly, reaching for my hand across the table. "For Lucas, give him the family he deserves." I withdrew my hand immediately. "There is no again, Andrew. That chapter of our lives ended the moment you chose my sister over our marriage." "I made a mistake," he insisted. "The biggest of my life. Sophia was a fantasy, not reality. What we had was real." "What we had is gone," I said firmly. "I've built a life without you, and it's a good life. Lucas and I are happy. But we could be happier together, as a proper family." The audacity of his assumption that I would welcome him back after everything was stunning. "The only relationship we have now is as co-parents, and even that is strained by your inconsistency." His expression hardened. "I've been trying, Valeria. I've changed my entire schedule to accommodate visits." "Except when you haven't," I countered. "Do you know Lucas stopped asking about you when you cancel? He just accepts it now, like disappointment is what he should expect from his father." Andrew flinched at this genuine pain crossing his face. "I'm trying to balance everything, the firm, the Seattle office expansion, my time with Lucas." "That's the problem," I interrupted. "Lucas isn't something to balance. He's a child who needs reliability, not just when it's convenient for your schedule." We parted that evening with tension lingering between us. 2 weeks later, Sophia appeared at my doorstep, unannounced, her designer handbag, contrasting sharply with her obviously rehearsed expression of contrition. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see," she began. "You're right about that," I confirmed, blocking the doorway to prevent her from entering. Lucas was at a playdate, thankfully, but I had no intention of inviting her into our home. I came to apologize. She attempted a sincere expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. What I did was unforgivable. "Is that all?" I asked, unmoved by this performance. "And I might need a place to stay, just temporarily." The parallel to 4 years ago was so exact it was almost comical. "No, Sophia, not for a night, not for an hour. You made your choices just as I've made mine." "But I'm your sister," she protested, as if this biological fact trumped her betrayal. "Family is supposed to help each other." "You stopped being family when you slept with my husband," I replied calmly. "Please don't contact me or Lucas again." As I closed the door on her shocked face, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The confrontation I had both dreaded and needed for 4 years had finally happened, and I had maintained my boundaries with confidence rather than anger or pain. The following week, I received an unexpected email from my mother, the first direct communication in nearly 3 years. "Your father and I would like to meet our grandson," she wrote. "We understand you may have reservations, but we hope you can find it in your heart to let us be grandparents to Lucas." The email triggered a complex mix of emotions. My parents had chosen peacekeeping over supporting me during the most painful period of my life. Yet they were Lucas's only grandparents, and I had seen firsthand the special relationship he had developed with Elaine, his honorary grandmother. After careful consideration and consultation with my therapist, I agreed to a video call as a first step. The conversation was stilted at first years of distance, creating an awkwardness that even Lucas's natural charm couldn't immediately dissolve. He has Andrew's eyes, my mother observed softly. But your smile, my father added, looking at me with regret that seemed genuine. When Lucas left to play after a polite 10 minutes of conversation, my mother addressed the elephant in the room. We failed you, Valeria. We thought we were maintaining family harmony, but we were actually enabling Sophia's worst behavior and dismissing your pain. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know we recognize our mistake now. This acknowledgement, years overdue, opened a door to healing I hadn't realized was possible. We agreed to monthly video calls with the possibility of an in-person visit the following summer if our reconnection continued positively. 2 months later, Andrew's attendance at visitations became even more sporadic. When he did show up, he seemed distracted, often checking his phone or bringing work to complete while Lucas played nearby. During one visit, Lucas skinned his knee on the playground, and Andrew seemed genuinely perplexed about how to comfort him. He likes to be held when he's hurt, I explained, watching Andrew awkwardly pat Lucas's back, and he needs to hear that it's okay to cry if something hurts. Andrew's expression softened as he gathered Lucas into a proper hug. I'm trying to learn all this on fast forward, he admitted. You've had years to figure him out. You would have too if you'd been here, I replied, not unkindly, but stating the reality we both knew. In early December, Andrew missed a court appearance regarding adjustments to our custody arrangement. His lawyer explained he was unavoidably detained at a major project presentation that could not be rescheduled. When he finally contacted me 3 days later, he mentioned casually that he had begun seeing someone, an interior designer who worked with his firm. Jessica understands my career demands, he explained, as if this somehow justified his continued prioritization of work over Lucas. She's excited to meet Lucas when the time is right. The right time apparently never materialized. By February, Andrew had rescheduled or cancelled more visits than he had kept. Lucas, now 5, had stopped asking about his father altogether, a self-protective indifference that broke my heart, even as it relieved the immediate practical challenges of co-parenting with someone so unreliable. With the support of Patricia, my attorney, I filed for a modification of custody, seeking full legal custody with defined visitation rights that Andrew would either use consistently or forfeit. The hearing was scheduled for April 15th. Andrew missed it, sending his lawyer with an affidavit explaining that a career-defining presentation required his presence in Chicago. The judge, the same stern woman who had presided over our original hearing, was unimpressed. Mr. Thompson has demonstrated through his actions that his career takes precedence over his parental responsibilities, she noted, reviewing the documentation of missed visits and cancelled appointments. While this court believes children benefit from relationships with both parents, those relationships must be consistent and reliable. She granted me full legal custody, with Andrew retaining the right to monthly weekend visitations, provided he gave at least 1 week's notice and maintained the schedule for 3 consecutive months. Any missed visits without documentation of emergency would result in further restriction of his parental rights. Outside the courtroom, I felt no triumph, only sadness for what could have been if Andrew had truly committed to being a father, rather than merely claiming the title. That spring brought unexpected developments in my personal life as well. Michael Chen, a pediatric surgeon at my hospital, had become a friend over the previous year, our conversations in the staff lounge gradually extending beyond work topics. Lucas mentioned meeting you at the hospital fundraiser, he said one day, as we shared coffee during a rare, quiet moment on shift. He was very impressed with your dinosaur knowledge, I replied with a smile. He told Elaine, you know even more than his books. Michael laughed. High praise indeed. I was wondering if you both might like to join me for the Natural History Museum exhibit this weekend. They have a new interactive dinosaur display that seems right up his alley. The invitation surprised me, Though we had developed a friendship, neither of us had suggested activities outside work hours before. That sounds wonderful, but I should be clear about something first. Lucas and I are a package deal, and he's my priority. I'm not looking for anything complicated right now. I understand completely, Michael said seriously. I'm just offering a museum visit with a colleague and her dinosaur-loving son. Nothing complicated about that. The museum trip was the first of many outings that gradually evolved from friendly gatherings into something more. Michael was patient, respectful of my boundaries, and genuinely interested in Lucas as a person rather than an obligation to be tolerated on the path to a relationship with me. Unlike Andrew, who had always seen children as a future project to be undertaken when convenient, Michael engaged with Lucas authentically, answering his endless questions with thoughtful responses rather than patronizing simplifications. By Lucas's 5th birthday party in November, Michael had become a regular presence in our lives. The celebration was small but joyful. Elaine Jamie, who flew in for the weekend, 3 friends from Lucas's kindergarten class, and Michael, who arrived with a telescope for stargazing rather than the elaborate electronic toys Andrew typically sent but rarely gave in person. Andrew had promised to attend, but called that morning with yet another work emergency. Lucas received the news with a shrug. "It's okay, Mommy. Dr. Mike will help me with my cake." The casual substitution revealed how quickly children adapt to the adults who actually show up for them, regardless of biological connection. While I still ensured Lucas maintained a relationship with his father during Andrew's increasingly infrequent visits, I recognized that family is built through presence and reliability, not merely through DNA. As winter turned to spring, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. The betrayal that had once defined my existence had become merely a chapter in a much larger story, one that included pain but wasn't limited to it. What had begun as survival had transformed into a life filled with purpose, joy, and authentic connections. The woman who had fled Pennsylvania 4 years earlier, heartbroken and terrified, had become someone stronger than I could have imagined, not despite the betrayal, but because of how I had chosen to respond to it. Looking back over the past 5 years, I sometimes barely recognize the woman I used to be. The betrayal that once consumed my every thought has faded into a dull ache that resurfaces occasionally but no longer defines me. The journey from that broken place to where I stand now wasn't easy, but it was necessary and ultimately healing. The first year after discovering Andrew and Sophia together was pure survival mode. Each day required immense effort just to function, to eat, to work, to prepare for my baby's arrival. The physical act of leaving Pennsylvania, of driving away from everything familiar, remains one of the bravest things I've ever done. I cried for the first 100 miles, then made a conscious decision to stop looking in the rearview mirror. Seattle became not just a new address, but a rebirth. The early days were painfully lonely, despite Jamie's regular phone calls and care packages. I would walk through parks filled with families and couples, acutely aware of my solitude and the enormous responsibility growing inside me. When panic threatened to overwhelm me, I would place my hands on my belly and whisper, "We're going to be okay, Lucas, I promise." Meeting Elaine was the first sign that the universe hadn't completely abandoned us. Her no-nonsense affection and practical support created the foundation of our new support system. She never asked for explanations or details about my past, simply offering help where needed and space when required. "Family isn't always blood," she told me once while rocking newborn Lucas, so I could shower for the first time in 3 days. Sometimes it's just who shows up and stays. The birth itself was terrifying, complications leading to an emergency C-section, the anesthesiologist struggling to place the epidural, Lucas's heart rate dropping dangerously low. I remember the ceiling tiles of the operating room, counting them repeatedly to stay conscious as medical staff worked urgently around me. The first cry Lucas made was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. proof that we had survived the impossible together. Those early months of motherhood taught me resilience I didn't know I possessed. Recovering from major surgery while caring for a newborn alone meant learning to do everything one-handed, sleeping in short increments and sometimes crying alongside Lucas at 3 a.m. from sheer exhaustion. But each small victory, a successful feeding, a peaceful nap, even managing to eat a meal while it was still warm, built my confidence incrementally. When Lucas smiled for the first time, a gummy, lopsided grin that appeared during a middle-of-the-night feeding, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about creating a life filled with joy and security for this perfect little person who trusted me completely. The Mothers Support Group at the community centre became another lifeline. There I met other women navigating single parenthood, some by choice, others through circumstances similar to mine. We traded babysitting hours, shared hand-me-down clothes and toys, and most importantly provided understanding that only comes from shared experience. I left my husband after finding him with my best friend, shared Tanya, whose daughter was a few months older than Lucas. Some days I'm not sure if I did the right thing. I wonder that too, I admitted. Not about leaving, but about not telling Andrew about the baby. Tanya squeezed my hand. We make the best decisions we can with the information we have at the time. That's all anyone can do. Those words became a mantra during moments of doubt. I had made the best decision I could to protect my child from a toxic situation. The confirmation came as Lucas grew into a happy, secure toddler, unaffected by the drama that had preceded his birth. When Andrew reappeared in our lives that day in the coffee shop, my first instinct was fear that he would disrupt the peaceful life we had built. Fear that Lucas would be hurt by inconsistent affection. Fear that courts would prioritize biological connection over emotional well-being. Some of those fears proved justified as Andrew's initial enthusiasm gave way to sporadic involvement that left Lucas confused. The hardest conversation was explaining to Lucas in terms a 4-year-old could understand why the father he had just discovered kept disappearing. Sometimes grown-ups have a hard time figuring out what's most important, I explained after Andrew missed his 3rd scheduled visit. It doesn't mean your daddy doesn't love you. He's just not very good at showing it yet. Is that why you and Daddy don't live together like Emma's parents? Lucas asked, his innocent question piercing my heart. Partly, I answered honestly, but mostly because Mommy and Daddy weren't good at being married to each other. We're better as separate people. The legal battles were exhausting both financially and emotionally. Each court appearance required reliving the betrayal and defending choices made in moments of profound pain. Patricia, my attorney, became both legal counsel and therapist as we navigated the complex family court system. They can mandate visitation, she reminded me during a particularly difficult period, but they can't mandate genuine interest or commitment. Andrew is showing the court exactly who he is through his actions. She was right. As months passed, Andrew's interest waned proportionally to his involvement with his new girlfriend and expanding career. The custody modification granting me full legal rights was less a victory than an official recognition of what had already become reality. My own healing journey progressed alongside these external challenges. Weekly therapy sessions helped me process not just Andrew's betrayal, but the family dynamics that had enabled it. My parents' conflict avoidance, Sophia's lifelong jealousy, my own tendency to caretake at the expense of self-protection. Forgiveness doesn't mean allowing people to hurt you again. My therapist explained when I struggled with boundary setting, it means releasing the hold their actions have on your peace. This perspective transformed my approach to both Andrew and my family. I could allow Lucas to know his father without expecting Andrew to become someone he wasn't. I could cautiously reconnect with my parents while maintaining clear expectations about respect for my choices. The most unexpected healing came through Michael's entrance into our lives. His patient friendship that gradually blossomed into romance showed me what healthy love looks like. Not the dramatic passion that had characterized my early relationship with Andrew, but something steadier and more authentic. I admire who you are. Michael told me on our third date, a simple dinner after Lucas was asleep with Elaine watching him, not just as a mother or a nurse, but as a person who rebuilt her life with such grace and strength. It was the first time anyone had recognized the work it had taken to create our new life, rather than pitying the circumstances that necessitated it. Michael saw me not as a victim or a single mother to be rescued, but as a whole person with value independent of my relationship to others. Lucas's birthday party last month was the culmination of our healing journey. Surrounded by people who had chosen to be part of our lives and had earned their places through consistent love and support, I watched my son blow out his candles with fierce concentration. "What did you wish for?" Michael asked him afterward. "Can't tell, or it won't come true," Lucas replied seriously, but then leaned in to whisper loudly, "But it was about our family getting bigger." The casual inclusion of Michael in his concept of our family brought tears to my eyes. Family, I had learned, isn't defined by blood or legal documents, but by presence, reliability, and love, freely given without expectation of return. My parents attended the party, their first visit to Seattle since our reconnection. Watching them interact with Lucas, awkward but genuinely affectionate, I realized that forgiveness hadn't weakened my boundaries, but had actually strengthened them. I could allow them limited access to our lives without surrendering my autonomy or denying past hurts. "You've done an amazing job with him," my mother said quietly as we washed dishes after the party. "I'm sorry we weren't here to help." "I'm sorry too," I replied honestly, "but we're here now, and that's what matters." Andrew sent a gift but didn't attend, another work commitment taking priority. Lucas mentioned his absence only once when opening the elaborate robot kit that arrived by courier. "Daddy always sends the coolest toys," he observed, "but Dr. Mike helps me build them." The wisdom in that simple observation struck me deeply. Material generosity without presence is ultimately empty, while genuine engagement, even with simpler gifts, creates lasting connection. As I look toward our future now, I feel a sense of peace that once seemed impossible. The betrayal that could have defined my life instead became the catalyst for building something more authentic. The pain hasn't disappeared completely. Certain anniversaries still bring a twinge of sadness, and explaining complex family dynamics to Lucas will only get more challenging as he grows older and asks more sophisticated questions. But the lesson I hope to teach him through our journey isn't that people are perfect or that relationships are easy, but that we always have choices in how we respond to hurt. We can choose bitterness or growth isolation or community victimhood or resilience. 5 years ago, I couldn't imagine smiling again, let alone building a life filled with purpose and joy. Now I understand that healing isn't about erasing the past, but integrating it into a larger story, one where betrayal is a chapter, not the conclusion. True freedom, I've learned, comes not from avoiding pain, but from refusing to let it dictate your future. Forgiveness of Andrew, of Sophia, of my parents, and ultimately of myself for not seeing what was happening wasn't for them, but for my own peace. As I tuck Lucas into bed tonight, surrounded by the birthday decorations we haven't yet taken down, I'm grateful for the journey that brought us here, every painful step and every unexpected blessing. "Mummy," Lucas murmurs sleepily, "are you happy?" "Yes, sweetheart," I answer truthfully. "I'm very happy, and that perhaps is the greatest victory of all." Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal or disappointment? How did you find the strength to move forward? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and healing. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the most beautiful futures grow from the most painful beginnings. Share this with someone who might need to hear that they too can rebuild after heartbreak.